Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Bitter Pill. So, ever since I've started going live on a regular basis, I've noticed that there's been a decline in the number of views I get on YouTube. Most of my viewership seems to be on Twitter, and I just want to kind of experiment and see what the audience will be if I go back to making a recorded video. So, anyway, today I wanted to talk about a recent controversy stemming from Noura Erakat's bid to become the vice presidential running mate of the Green Party's Jill Stein. And Noura Erakat is a professor and activist who's Palestinian-American and obviously cares passionately about the cause of Palestine and stopping the genocide that's going on there. So, what Nora proposed it, and she was rejected as the Green Party's vice presidential nominee in favor of Butch Ware, who is a professor and activist at UC Santa Barbara. He is a historian specializing in African history, Black Revolutionary history, and is also very knowledgeable about and passionate and involved in the Palestinian cause. So anyway, I can get to that another time, but I thought he was a good pick, and so the uh, topic for this afternoon is why I think, based on her proposal, Noura Erakat wouldn't have been a good pick, and the Green Party was right to, or Jill Stein was right to choose someone other than her as her running mate. So let me just show you what it is that Noura Erakat proposed. Let's see. Okay, here we go. So she says, in respect to the Green Party's request to, that's not what I wanted. Here we go. I offered to join the ticket, Jill Stein, presidential candidate, and her as VP running mate, if they would be willing to concede the election if Dems deliver on permanent ceasefire and arms embargo. The idea being using Stein's margin in 3 swing states to compel those concessions. Okay, so what she's offering, in other words, is for the Green Party to try and make a deal with the Democrats, and of course in the background Israel, that if they would adopt a permanent ceasefire and the U.S. would impose an arms embargo, then uh, the Greens would agree to uh, withdraw from actively competing for the presidency. Um, so I have a number of questions about this. So first of all, even if the Democrats actually accepted this deal and implemented a ceasefire and an arms embargo, how the hell do we know that what we've got is permanent? And so, okay, they withdraw from Gaza, they're not genociding I don't think that's a word, but I'll use it anyway, because you know what I mean. The Palestinian people in Gaza, the U.S. isn't supplying weapons anymore. Okay, great. But how the hell do you know that what you've got is permanent? Either the U.S. or Israel or both could renege at any time. So let's say that a month before uh, election day in November, uh, in a couple of months, 3 months. Um, let's say that a month before that, the Biden administration cuts off the flow of weapons and forces Israel to accept a ceasefire, a permanent ceasefire. Wink, wink. And then the Greens stop actively campaigning. They can't very well withdraw their names from the ballot, uh, as Jill Stein's campaign manager Jason Call pointed out. But let's say they stop going around the country and doing interviews and so forth. And then you know the day after the election. So let's say there's been a month-long ceasefire. The day after the election, the Biden administration starts sending Israel weapons again and says, "Go to it." Um, you know, how can we be sure that's not going to happen? And Dr. Erakat seems to have forgotten who she's dealing with here. Uh, Ben Norton has called the United States the Fourth Reich because the United States has so consistently supported fascistic movements and governments all over the world, ever since World War II, including literal Nazis, as they're supporting literal Nazis, which are a component of those in power in Ukraine, for instance. Through Operation Paperclip, they enabled Nazis to escape from punishment for war crimes and pursue careers elsewhere than Germany, including in the United States, etc. I don't want to take time to go through all that history, but um, and then Israel, its fascist sidekick, it's had close relationships with every unsavory regime you can imagine. Very close with the Ukraine fascists, for example, very close with Latin American fascism, and obviously Israel itself is very fascistic. They're committing genocide. What more could you expect a fascist regime to do? And you cannot make a deal with fascists. You cannot trust them. You have to defeat them. Go back to what happened when there was a ceasefire deal and hostage exchange back in late November last year between Israel and Hamas. Israel violated the ceasefire agreement in various ways, starting within an hour of it going into effect, as I've talked about on here before. Hamas tried its best. They lobbied to have a permanent ceasefire, or at least a longer ceasefire. They did actually get Israel to extend the ceasefire for another few days to allow further exchanges of hostages. But ultimately, the Israeli government was like, no, we want to kill you. We're not going to have a permanent ceasefire. So, then they got back to the genocide within, a week or so after the ceasefire went into effect. And again, during the ceasefire, they frequently violated it, even though they did mostly withdraw troops from Gaza and did exchange hostages. But, they tortured hostages or prisoners. They threatened their families if they had any sort of celebration. They, still killed people in Gaza during the ceasefire, etc. So let's have a look at what Jason Call, Jill Stein's campaign manager, who who's also a candidate for Congress in Washington, I believe. Anyway, he's a campaign manager for Stein and Ware, and said this regarding uh, Nora's proposal and why they rejected it and her. The proposal was that if uh, Noura Erakat joins the team as VP, it would be under the condition that the Stein campaign withdraw from the election should the Democrats secure a permanent ceasefire and offensive arms embargo. We rejected it because, one, you cannot trust either the Democrats or Israel to keep their word. And Noura Erakat's objection was, well, I wasn't just talking about them promising, I was talking about them actually. But again, the problem is you can't ever assume that if someone says they're going to have a permanent ceasefire and then implements a ceasefire, that it's actually going to be permanent. You cannot assume that. Second, we would be sabotaging the entire election for the Green Party, both now and in 2028, giving up ballot lines we have earned. And third, as I mentioned before, it's not possible to withdraw from most ballots anyway. The best we could do is to stop campaigning and tell people not to vote for us. We cannot request the names be removed from ballots. We do not believe the concessions to the empire advance the cause of justice. Of course, the highest priority is for a ceasefire in Palestine, but we also seek a full dismantling of the apartheid statement and the occupation of Palestine by the Zionist regime. Okay, well, what I would add to that is this proposal is for one thing, a violation of voters' trust. Because Green Party voters want to build a third party, as well as a movement to fight for social justice and ultimately for socialism. Although not every supporter of the Green Party is a socialist. It is part of the Green Party's charter. Since about a decade ago, it is explicitly a socialist party. You can't pull the rug out from under voters who are expecting not only to be able to vote for a Green candidate for president, but to have Jill Stein and Butch Ware campaigning as hard as they can until the end. They've basically promised voters to do that based on agreeing to run for office. And not only to earn votes, because let's be honest, it's highly unlikely that a third party candidate is going to win the presidential election. The last time a technically third party candidate won the presidency was in 1860 when Abraham Lincoln of the Republican Party, which had begun as a third party only 6 years earlier, he won. But that's the only time. So it's not very likely that they're going to win. But so it's not only about earning votes, although the more votes they win, the more they will receive funding in the future, qualifies them for ballot lines if they get more than 5%. But also, they're trying to raise Americans' political consciousness, not only about Palestine, but many other issues as well, climate change, Ukraine, and so on and so forth. And to build for the future, to build a Green Party as a future, as a third party that's stronger in the future. So if they pulled out, that wouldn't just sabotage the election for the Greens if the Dems implemented a ceasefire and the deal went through, and then perhaps backtracked on it. It would sabotage a lot of voters' trust in and support for the Green Party. You don't do what you promise. is what a lot of voters would conclude. And also, one of the Green Party's core values is grassroots democracy. Bottom up grassroots democracy. So, a backroom deal between the Greens and the DNC would be the exact opposite of that. Because in this context, what grassroots democracy means is that if voters wanted to reward Harris with their vote, should the Biden-Harris administration get a ceasefire deal and cut off weapons sales, they can already do that. It's up to them who they're going to vote for. And, they should have the option of voting for her or voting for Jill Stein or, whoever they want. They should have the option to reward her or to punish her for the past 10 months and for the Biden, the genocide and the Biden administration's generally horrible track record, whatever the case may be, whatever they want. So, why would you want to take away that democratic choice from them? Well, I mean, they're on the ballot, so they could still vote for them. But why would you want to leave people in the position of voting for a candidate who doesn't really want to run anymore? And there are just so many ways to pressure the Democrats on Palestine besides Noura Erakat's proposed tactic. I mean, hell, the uncommitted movement is basically already doing the same thing as what Erakat is proposing that the Greens do. And they have a lot of people behind them. Hundreds of thousands of people voted uncommitted in the Democratic quote-unquote primaries. And the uncommitted movement, by encouraging people to refrain from committing to the Democratic Party unless the Democratic Party implements a ceasefire and arms embargo and so forth. And if they do, then they could vote for Harris. If they don't, they wouldn't vote for Harris. They could do that, and it doesn't have the drawback of potentially directly undermining a socialist third party. Leave it to the voters. Also, there's the boycott and divestment and sanctions movement. It's now reached an unprecedented level of success. Israel's economy is very much hurting right now. If things keep going like this, Israel's not gonna survive. They're just not going to be economically viable if they continue to put hundreds of thousands of members of their workforce into this war. If Yemen continues its blockade in the Red Sea, if more and more companies are and other institutions are succumbing to pressure not to be financially involved with and supportive of Israel. So that's going well. So why should the Green Party do this little thing that Erakat is proposing? That has these huge drawbacks that I talked about, when there are all these other tactics that are being implemented that are having some success that don't have those drawbacks. And finally, there's so many other vital issues. What about climate change? Should the Green Party stop campaigning for a Green New Deal, at least at the presidential level, because the Democratic Party promised to have a permanent ceasefire and arms embargo, a promise they could break at any time, even if they did actually implement an embargo and a ceasefire? What about the proxy war in Ukraine against Russia? The U.S. proxy war in Ukraine. Every Democrat supports that. Certainly Kamala Harris does. Or Kamala Harris, however you say it. Does the Green Party want to stop criticizing, or does the presidential ticket want to stop criticizing Harris and the Democrats for supporting this fascistic Ukrainian government and its war to destabilize Russia? What about universal health care? We're just going to abandon the opportunity to have a national platform to talk about those and many other issues during the last however many weeks of the campaign it is, just to reward the Democrats for doing one thing. Because mind you, this genocide started, in October last year. But before that, there was a Green Party that was contesting elections at every level, because pretty much everything else the Democrats as well as the Republicans do is bad. It's the most awful thing in the world, but this genocide that the U.S. is backing, is one of many, many horrible things that the Democrats are doing. So, we need to keep the pressure up on them about all of these things, not just make our campaigning against the uniparty political establishment centered around that one issue, however vital that issue is, because there's already so many ways that the Democrats are pressured on Palestine. We don't need this. All right. That's all I wanted to say for today. And please vote for Jill Stein or the third party candidate of your choice. Fuck the Democrats, fuck the Republicans, and free Palestine.